My sister borrowed my car for the weekend. What she didn't know: every company vehicle I own has a hidden tracker. And what I discovered changed everything. I'm Erin, mid-30s, and I run a small construction business that I built from the ground up. It's not glamorous, but it's mine, and I've always been protective of what I've earned. I manage my company vehicles like a hawk, because every one of them represents hard work, sweat, and long hours. That's why I install trackers on all of them. Not because I don't trust my employees, but because I've learned that when you're responsible for expensive assets, you can't just hope for the best. Lila, my younger sister, has always been different from me. Where I'm structured and careful, she's free-spirited, reckless, and often careless with other people's things. Growing up, she was the one who'd borrow clothes without asking, take the last cookie and claim she didn't, or promise she'd pay me back later, and never mention it again. I can't say I was surprised when, as adults, the pattern didn't really change. She'd show up at my house asking for favors, borrowing money, or leaning on me when her plans went sideways. So when she asked if she could borrow one of my company cars for the weekend, I hesitated. It wasn't like I didn't have an extra. It was a truck my crew used during the week, but it usually sat idle on weekends. Still, something in my gut told me not to hand her the keys. Lila had a way of pushing boundaries, and I knew giving her that truck was asking for trouble. But she was insistent. She said she just needed it to get out of town, maybe visit a friend, nothing major. She flashed that innocent grin, the one she'd used on me since we were kids, the one that usually got her what she wanted. Against my better judgment, I gave in. I told myself it was just a truck, just one weekend. What harm could it do? But deep down, unease settled in my stomach, heavy and cold, the kind that doesn't go away no matter how much you try to rationalize it. Sunday night rolled around, and like I always did, I logged into the tracking system to make sure all company vehicles were accounted for. It was just routine, the same way I checked locks before bed or balanced my books at the end of the week. But when I pulled up the data for the truck Lila had borrowed, my stomach tightened. The digital map didn't show quick errands around town or a short drive to a friend's apartment. The trail stretched miles outside the city, weaving through areas I had no ties to, ending in neighborhoods I'd never even set foot in. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen longer than I needed to. It didn't make sense. Lila had promised she was spending the weekend at a girlfriend's place, just a low-key getaway. I knew her patterns well enough to expect a little exaggeration, but this wasn't a harmless detour. The truck had been parked overnight in the same unfamiliar spot more than once. The timestamps told me she wasn't just passing through. She'd stayed there, hours at a time, long enough that it felt deliberate. My first instinct was to grab my phone, call her out, and demand an explanation. The thought of her lying straight to my face made my jaw clench. But another part of me, the part that had learned to stay cautious, held me back. I'd dealt with employees trying to pull one over on me, and I'd learned the value of keeping quiet until I had everything laid out in front of me. Accusing someone without solid proof only gave them room to twist the story. So I sat in the glow of that screen, fighting with myself. The uneasiness grew heavier the longer I thought about it. She had said she was just staying with a friend. So why did the logs show her miles away, at an address I didn't recognize? Why keep it a secret if it was innocent? I closed the laptop finally, forcing myself to breathe, but the questions stayed lodged in my chest. Something was off, I could feel it, and for once I wasn't going to brush it aside. Instead of confronting her, I decided to wait. If there was one thing I'd learned, it was that patience often revealed more than pressure ever could. And this time, I wanted the truth laid bare, with no room for excuses. The next morning, I couldn't shake the uneasiness. Curiosity pushed me back to the tracking system. Only this time I dug deeper. I pulled up the mileage reports, matched them against the GPS history, and began piecing together the pattern. The truck hadn't just wandered. It had settled at one specific place, night after night. The address repeated like a flashing signal on the screen. I copied it down, intending to look it up later, but as soon as the numbers registered in my mind, my pulse jumped. It wasn't just some random location. I knew it. Too well. The street name, the house number. It all lined up with a place I had been countless times. My throat tightened as the recognition sank in. That was Matt's house. Matt, the man I'd been building a future with for 2 years. The one who spent holidays with my family, who held my hand during tough days at work, who promised me stability after years of feeling like I had to do everything on my own. I stared at the screen, willing myself to be wrong. Maybe it was a glitch, Maybe I'd misread the data. Maybe there was some explanation that didn't involve betrayal. But no matter how many times I refreshed the page, the logs stayed the same. The truck stopped there Friday night. Stayed until morning. Returned again Saturday, the same pattern repeating. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't innocent. The lines between Lila's story and the digital proof didn't match up, and now the possibility I'd been pushing away slammed into me with full force. I felt sick, like the floor had tilted beneath me. My own sister taking my vehicle, driving it straight to the man I trusted most. The betrayal formed itself in my mind, jagged and raw, even though I hadn't yet seen them together. My instincts screamed the truth, but my heart resisted. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want this ugly suspicion to be real. Still, the evidence was sitting right in front of me, cold and undeniable. And as much as it hurt, I knew this was only the beginning of what I was about to uncover. When Lila stopped by the following afternoon, she acted like nothing was unusual. She tossed her hair back, dropped the keys onto my counter, and thanked me with that same breezy tone she always used when she wanted to charm her way out of responsibility. I forced myself to stay calm, though every nerve in my body was burning. I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice even, and asked casually, "So, how was your weekend?" The words felt heavy on my tongue, but I delivered them lightly, as though I didn't already know exactly where she'd been. Without missing a beat, she smiled and said, "Pretty quiet. I stayed with Kayla. We had a little girls' night, nothing exciting." Her face didn't so much as flicker. No hesitation, no guilt showing through her expression. The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease, like she'd been preparing it all along. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her answer, though my stomach churned. The image of the tracker logs burned in my mind, the address branded there like a scar. Hearing her weave a story while I held the truth made my chest tighten with rage. I wanted to scream at her, to demand why she thought it was okay to drive my truck to his place, why she thought I was too blind to notice. But I swallowed every word. Confronting her right then would only give her the chance to spin another tale, and I wasn't about to let her wriggle free. I needed something so concrete she couldn't deny it, something that would shatter her web of excuses in an instant. So I forced a small smile, acted like I believed her, and let her walk away thinking she had fooled me. On the outside, I was calm, collected, indifferent. Inside, I was fire. Each beat of my heart felt like it was pounding against a locked door. I wasn't going to slam it open just yet. Not until I had every piece of evidence in my hands. Only then would she understand what it meant to betray me. The following week, I prepared in silence. If I was going to uncover the truth, I needed more than location data. I needed something that couldn't be twisted or denied. At the shop, I installed a discreet camera in the dash of the truck, angled perfectly to capture whoever got inside. It was small enough that no one would notice, not even if they were looking closely. When Friday rolled around, I mentioned to Lila that I wouldn't be using the vehicle over the weekend. I kept my tone casual, as though it were no big deal. She jumped at the chance, her eagerness almost too quick, and I handed her the keys without letting a single emotion slip across my face. Inside, though, my hands itched with the anticipation of what I might finally confirm. That night, I pulled up the tracker again. The little dot moved across the map, leaving the city behind, cutting straight toward a neighborhood I already knew too well. My chest tightened as it slowed and settled at the same familiar address. There it was again, no variation, no mistake. She'd gone back. I didn't watch the footage immediately. I waited until I was alone, sitting in the dark with only the glow of my laptop. The video began grainy, then cleared as headlights illuminated the driveway. My heart pounded as the driver's side door opened and Lila stepped out. She walked up to the front, and a moment later, Matt emerged. He leaned down, and before they even crossed the threshold of the house, she was in his arms. Their kiss was unhurried, comfortable, the kind that came from routine, not impulse. I felt my stomach turn, the air leaving my lungs as I stared at the scene I could never unsee. Shock gave way to something sharper. Pain, yes, but laced with a cold, steady rage. The kind that settles deep and doesn't burn out. I closed the laptop, my jaw tight. Whatever illusion I had clung to was gone. Now I had proof, undeniable and damning. And with it, any hesitation about what I needed to do dissolved completely. I didn't close my eyes once that night. The recording played over and over, each replay cutting deeper than the last. Every angle of that stolen moment between them seared into me until it felt like the images were carved behind my eyelids. The betrayal wasn't some vague suspicion anymore. It was real, alive, undeniable. As the hours dragged by, I found myself thinking back on all the times I'd stepped in for Lila, paying off bills when she fell short, helping her move when she couldn't find anyone else, covering her mistakes so our parents wouldn't worry. I'd defended her, vouched for her, trusted her in ways I never trusted anyone else. And this was what she'd done with that trust, slipped behind my back, taking something that wasn't hers to take. It wasn't just the act itself, it was who it came from. A sister is supposed to be safe, someone who stands beside you when the world falls apart. Instead, she had aligned herself with the one person who should have been my partner. That double edge cut cleaner than any stranger's knife ever could. By dawn, the sorrow had hardened into something else. I could feel it settle into my bones, cold and steady, stripping away the part of me that wanted to cry. Confronting them outright, shouting until my voice broke. That would be too easy for them. They could deny, twist, run. No. What they deserved was exposure so absolute they couldn't hide from it. I sat at my kitchen table, the first light of morning spilling across the wood, and I knew what had to come next. I wasn't just going to demand an explanation. I was going to tear the curtain down in front of everyone who mattered. Their little secret wasn't going to stay in the dark. Not after what they'd stolen from me. The days that followed were a test of control. I moved through the week with practiced ease, greeting calls from Matt the same way I always did, answering Lila's texts with my usual clipped but sisterly tone. Neither of them caught the shift beneath the surface. If anything, they seemed comfortable, convinced their lives were safe. While I smiled on the outside, inside I was building something meticulous. I reached out to my parents first, suggesting we all get together since it had been a while. They were delighted, and soon the idea grew into a casual barbecue at my place. I extended the invitation wider, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin or two, just enough to make the gathering feel warm and ordinary. And of course, I included Matt. It would have been strange not to. Lila's response came quickly, almost too cheerful. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter, just confirmed she'd be there. That confidence, that smug certainty she was untouchable, fueled the fire inside me. She had no clue the stage was already being set, every detail arranged so her own actions would corner her. When I wasn't working, I was organizing. Groceries, chairs, decorations. It all served as cover for what really mattered. The footage sat stored and backed up, ready to play on command. I checked it twice, then again, making sure nothing could glitch or disappear at the wrong moment. I wasn't going to rely on words alone. People lie. Videos don't. By the time Saturday crept closer, everything was locked into place. The invitations were accepted, the grill was cleaned, and the evidence was ready. To anyone else, it looked like I was simply hosting family for a sunny afternoon. But in my mind, it was more than that. It was the perfect stage for the truth to make its entrance. The afternoon of the barbecue arrived warm and bright, the kind of day made for laughter and clinking glasses. My backyard buzzed with chatter as relatives settled into chairs, plates piled with food from the grill. I moved among them with a steady smile, offering drinks, checking on everyone, making sure nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No one suspected the storm about to hit. When the meal wound down and conversation quieted, I stood near the patio door, holding my glass. "I'm glad you all came," I began, my voice even steady. "It means a lot having family together." They nodded, smiling, expecting nothing more than a few sentimental words. That was when I mentioned I had something to show. I walked inside, picked up my laptop, and connected it to the television in the living room. Just a quick clip from the truck cam. I explained lightly, pretending it was an accident that the file opened. The video filled the screen, soundless but clear. At first, people leaned forward, unsure what they were seeing. Then came the moment. Lila stepping out of the vehicle, Matt appearing from the doorway, and the two of them meeting in a kiss that left no room for interpretation. The air snapped in half with the sound of gasps. Plates clattered, someone covered their mouth, and a silence heavier than stone fell over the room. I stood motionless, eyes fixed on the screen. When I finally spoke, my tone was calm, controlled. "So that's where my car's been going." The words cut sharper than if I had screamed. Lila crumpled almost instantly, tears spilling as she tried to stammer out excuses. Matt froze, then shifted toward the door, as if escape might erase what everyone had just seen. I stepped into his path, my voice low but final. "Get out." He didn't argue. He left under the weight of dozens of eyes, while my sister sobbed into her hands, the room still echoing with the truth neither of them could ever bury again. The silence after the footage ended was almost unbearable. My parents were the first to react, their faces pale with shock that shifted quickly into anger. My mother's voice trembled as she asked Lila how she could do something so cruel, while my father's words came out sharper, cutting her excuses off before they could form. Other relatives shook their heads, muttering in disbelief, the betrayal sinking in with every second. Lila reached for me through tears, insisting she hadn't meant for it to happen, that it was a mistake, that she loved me and didn't want to lose me. Her sobs filled the room, but they didn't move me. I had heard apologies before, smaller ones for smaller wrongs, and they never stopped her from repeating the same behavior. This was beyond repair. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady even as hers cracked. You chose him over me. That's not something I forgive. The words seemed to collapse her completely. She dropped her face into her hands, weeping harder as my parents turned away, unable to even look at her. Matt, of course, didn't return. But later that evening, my phone lit up with his name again and again. Calls, texts, voicemails, each one ignored until I finally blocked every number he had ever used. I wasn't about to give him a second chance to explain, because I already knew the truth. He made his choice, just like she had. From that day on, I treated my vehicles differently. The truck that once carried their secret became a reminder of what vigilance had revealed. I detailed it until it gleamed, locked it securely, and kept the keys under my own watch. No one borrowed it again. It wasn't just about the car. It was about drawing a line. Some things are too valuable to hand over, and my trust was at the top of that list. In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle, but the scars remained. I kept turning it over in my mind. How easy it is to guard yourself against outsiders, how much harder it is when the knife comes from the people closest to you. Betrayal doesn't sting because it's shocking. It stings because it comes from the last place you expect, the very hands you once trusted to hold you up. Lila tried reaching out, a few texts, one awkward voicemail. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, I drew a firm line and refused to step back over it. She wasn't just my sister anymore. She was the person who proved family ties don't excuse treachery. My silence became the answer she didn't want to hear. Instead of drowning in grief, I redirected my focus where it mattered. I poured my energy into my business, working longer hours, securing new contracts, and keeping my crew running tighter than ever. Success became my shield, discipline my armor. With every deal closed and every job completed, I felt myself harden, sharpen, and grow steadier. The softness that once gave Lila chance after chance was gone, replaced by something colder but stronger. Looking back now, I see it clearly. She thought it was just a weekend favor, just another time she could take what wasn't hers. But this time the cost wasn't a loan or a forgotten debt. It was me. She borrowed my car for the weekend. She didn't know it would cost her a sister forever.